Hey everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we're going to take a look at Mercury's upcoming appearance as the evening star. Now, this is really important because while tracking Mercury is always important in Mercury's appearances and stations and retrogrades, both as the evening star and as the morning star, but in particular when Mercury is really well dignified and making its appearance, you want to pay close attention because it's a very powerful Mercury that has the power to speak as an omen or as an oracle. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to tell you a little bit about this appearance, what it means, what the evening star appearance means, a little bit about omens and oracles and appearances in the sky in general, a little kind of history of divination. And then we're going to talk about Mercury's appearance in all of the 12 houses, depending on what your rising sign is. So that's where we're heading for today. In the meantime, yeah, let's see here. Okay, I'm going to put the chart up on the screen and show you what this looks like. Now, right now, obviously I'm in Minneapolis now, and you can see the real-time clock. You know, the sun rose not too long ago, so it's making its way upward in the sky, and Mercury is trailing right behind it, but is also ahead of it in zodiacal order. So what that means is that if we track this out, we're going to just move through the 24-hour day here. The rotation of the Earth on its axis is causing all these planets to circle around the sky from our perspective. And then what I want you to notice is what happens when the sun gets into the western sky, marked out by the 7th house. What you're going to see here, let's just back up by an hour, and let's go take it kind of minute at a time. You're going to see that once the sun reaches the DS, where they're both at 4 degrees right there, that means that the sun is setting. Now, what you're going to notice is that Mercury at 13 degrees is still above the horizon. So this kind of last week of August, first week of September, we're going to start to see Mercury coming into view in the western sky just after sunset. Now, this typically happens the average that astrologers use is about 15 degrees. So when a planet is within 15 degrees of the sun, typically it becomes invisible. That's called, and then falling under the beams. And then when it gets even closer, sometimes astrologers will use about an 8-degree range. It's said to be combust, which means it's getting kind of burnt up. But when the planet starts to emerge on the other side of the sun, depending on who's making the application, in the case of the superior planets like Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, the sun makes the conjunction. In the case of planets like the moon, Venus, and Mercury, those planets are going to make the conjunction to the sun. So when they move out in front of the sun in zodiacal order, that means that they're starting to recover their own light and they're about to make an appearance again. In the case of the moon, it'll be like an early waxing crescent. In the case of Mercury and Venus, they'll appear as the evening star. So that's what's happening right now in the West. And what makes this really unique, I mean, again, all appearances, any planet that appears for the first time was considered to have powerful oracular significance, which means it's speaking, it's talking, it's saying something, it's announcing something, it's heralding something. But when the planet is emerging from under the beams and it's in its own house, Mercury, of course, is in its own house of Virgo, and it's in its own exaltation. Virgo is also the exaltation of Mercury. Then you have this very powerful ability for Mercury to say something or to bring meaningful significations. So that's why we're tracking it. What's really interesting about this is that you get to about that 15-degree marker. Let's track this out by a couple of days here. Once you get the sun to about 10 degrees, then you've got Mercury coming into about 23, 24 degrees. That's right about that 14, 15-degree range. And it's right about this time. It's not an exact moment, but it's say a period of a couple of days or even a week where Mercury is making its first appearance and speaking. Now, at that same time, what I find so interesting is that we have a couple of other really significant transits happening. One of them is the sun will be making an exact trine to Uranus. The other thing that's happening is that Mercury is going to be separating from an opposition to Neptune. This has the feeling to me because the Mercury's opposition to Neptune can bring obfuscation or uncertainty or kind of a divine chaos where we don't know exactly what's going on, or we're in the dark, or we're feeling our way through something intuitively, but we don't have all the information that we need, or things are a little blurry or fuzzy. Or we could be following, following that sense of calling, but we're unsure of what's going to come of something. Typically, you'll see themes like that sort of blending and mingling together when Mercury opposes Neptune. Well, at the same time that Mercury separates, the 3-degree range of separation is broken, and then the sun trines Uranus, and Mercury makes its appearance. It's dazzling in the sky with all this power in its own sign and exaltation. That has the feeling of a sudden breakthrough, something that you've been waiting for that suddenly announces itself, that suddenly appears, that suddenly clarifies itself, and that could represent some kind of breakthrough or some revolution of circumstance. By that, I mean something that's been stuck or stagnant or in a holding pattern that suddenly breaks free from that holding pattern or clarifies itself and could represent a moment of greater inspiration in general. So that's why I like this and wanted to talk about it, because it has that feeling of like a very important announcement. Now, one thing you do have to be careful of is with the opposition from Mercury, it is possible that people will announce grand plans, schemes, ideas, etc., that are in some ways meant to deceive, or that are meant to cloak or hide or divert your attention from something. So this could also be a moment where Mercury appears and makes a big announcement, but it's something where you need to be very, very careful and discerning or discriminating in the information that's being presented or the intentions behind the information that's being presented. There's that famous, saying you hear people in the news use: watch what they do, not what they say. And this is another moment like that as well. But aside from that kind of slippery Neptune potential in the midst here, I think that the general idea here is movement, clarity, and the ability to understand something that has been in a process, or for there to be a sudden moment of breakthrough on something that you've been waiting for, and something that it's almost like, when the timer goes off, when you're making something that you're excited to eat, from my favorite is when my wife makes really good banana bread. And you can smell it, it's getting ready, you're like, and then the timer goes off and you're like, oh my God, that moment, which my girls freak out, by the way, as well. Like, that's kind of what Mercury's on a timer. Mercury's ready to go, ding, it's ready. And so something that's been cooking, something that's been in gestation, that you've been waiting anxiously for it to reach that right potential moment, that's the real, I think, exciting potential that I feel behind this transit. So, all right, that's a few things about what makes this transit so powerful. But let's talk now in general a little bit about divination and oracles, and why a star, or a planet in this case, appearing as an evening star or as a morning star is such a big deal, or why ancient astrologers considered it such a big deal. So the general idea is that ancient astrologers considered the stars to be the planets, which were the wandering stars, to be the omens or oracles of the gods. The planets, sometimes people confuse this for thinking that the planets were the gods. And it's true that in ancient times, there were certain cultures that treated the planets more or less like gods. But when we look at the Hellenistic tradition, we say, for example, Kronos, or Saturn, is the star of Kronos, which is to say it's the indicator of Kronos. Imagine that, you and I and a group of people or whatever are sitting in a circle somewhere, and someone's in the middle and they're asking a question, and they're like, what will become of my life during my 21st year, right? And Saturn holds up a little angry face, and Venus holds up a little happy face, or whatever. And maybe Mercury is like, but the point is that each of the planets are not the god itself. It's the indicator of the god. It is something emblematic of what the god is thinking or doing or willing or presiding over within the karmic flow of the universe, which is comprised of innumerable energies that are deeply mysterious to us. So when we think about the birth chart, what we're really thinking about is, here's a collection of the omens and indicators, the signs of the gods, and how their will was engaged with or presiding over and issuing different kinds of judgments or proclamations about the nature of your destiny or fate. So because that's what they're doing, ancient astrologers thought of the sky as a kind of heavenly writing, as a heavenly script. In fact, there's a great book by Francesca Rochberg called On the Heavenly Writing, or just the Heavenly Writing, which gives you kind of a really good history of Mesopotamian, Babylonian astral omen divination and what it was like, and where this idea of a heavenly language sort of came from in the first place. It's a really fascinating book. It's a little academic and sort of heavy, but I really recommend it. I think it's awesome. So at any rate, in these traditions that preceded Hellenistic astrology, it was quite common to think of the language of the planets as a language, as a heavenly writing. Well, here's what's really important, right? When you are, you remember that game? It was like, I don't know how people made it, but it was a game, and it was like you held it, and it was like 4 little corners, and you would like open and close it, and you'd open and close it in different directions, and then you'd stop, and then you'd flip it open, and you'd be like, oh, sorry, you get to live in a shack, and then you do it again, and like, oh, you get to live in a mansion. I don't know what this game was called. If anyone can remember the name of that game, you get bonus points if you can name it or drop a link to a picture of it. But you'd like keep unfolding it and folding it and unfolding it, and then you'd go stop, and then you'd flip one of the corners open, and it would have something, and it'd be like, oh, and it was always like something about how you were going to turn out as an adult. And I remember playing it in, like, I don't know, grade school on the bus, and the girls would have it, and but you could make it. It was this whole, okay, I'm going to shut up. So anyway, if you think about the sky as like a rotating little game like that, right? It's always rotating. And because that's what the sky is doing, right? It's always kind of rotating. And certain things are appearing, they open, and then they close and they disappear, like a flower. They open and then they close and they disappear. And when something opens and appears, it's announcing something, just like you were to land on, I can't believe I'm using this analogy. It's so weird. Anyway, you would land on one and then you flip it open, right? Well, same thing in the sky. When a planet is invisible, it's like one of the little folds on the game is not showing itself. When a planet appears, it speaks and it says, this is what will be. This is what will happen. And depending on the planet's dignity, meaning how comfortable it is in its own sign, or if it's having to compromise with the planetary host of another sign and therefore kind of compromise its results. All the stupid things I keep thinking in my head about that game. It would be fun to make like an adult version of that game, like, oh, COVID or so. At any rate, when a planet appears in the evening sky, or when a planet appears in the morning sky, it's coming forth and it's speaking something. And if the planet's really well dignified, or its dignity is really jacked up, then basically what it's going to do is it's going to proclaim some kind of fated event or sequence of events or process or mood or atmosphere that will become pervasive and strong, depending, of course, on where it lands in your chart and the configurations of your chart. That's sort of the X factor. But it will announce that, and that's sort of what you get. That's like your cosmic fortune cookie. And the appearance right now of Mercury is amazingly potent, because it is emerging, gaining its own light, its strength. It's going to announce something, and there it is, exalted and in its own rulership. Plus, the sun, as it announces itself, picks up a very beneficial trine. Remember, trines are of the nature of Jupiter, to Uranus, the great clarifying, revolutionizing combination, Sun-Uranus. So it's a very expansive, like heightened, a moment of heightened awareness and lucidity. And when Mercury is announcing it, Mercury presides over a lot of other things specifically too. So, for example, things involving money and exchange, currency, and deals or negotiations. Anything related to merchants in the marketplace could be mercurial in nature, or anything involving some kind of dealing or negotiating. Agreements and the need to make agreement based on a variety of different stipulations and contractual, what am I saying? Contractual obligations that people have to one another and how that's all worked out and worded and phrased. But Mercury can also announce moments of mental or intellectual clarity and awareness and brightness. So, a new idea can come into your head that's quite potent and starts to move things or set things in motion. All right. What else? So Mercury's appearance then is going to be understood specifically as an omen that is about to speak. And Mercury does this all year long, right? Mercury will disappear and sort of go invisible, and then it appears again. For ancient astrologers, if you were born right as Mercury was making an appearance, whether evening star or morning star, or if it was making a station, meaning it was stopping and changing directions, direct or retrograde, those moments were considered very important. And it basically points you to Mercury in the chart and says, yeah, Mercury is going to be loud in your lifetime. Like, even though the cosmic jury gets to all the planets preside over our births and have different little omens and indicators that they hold up to say about us, you get a mansion. No, you get a shack. So all of the planets, they're all presiding, they're all saying different things about our life, but not all of them get to speak with equal strength. Not all of them get to weigh in equally. And that's something that I think that's lost on us a little bit in modern astrology, because we're more egalitarian in our thinking, right? We're like, we're in a sense, we're less interested in hierarchies than, in ancient astrologers were more understanding the universe as kind of a natural hierarchy, but a spiritual one, not like a gross material one that's all about power. So, for example, the gods are they are in service to the one, which is sort of the ultimate at the top of the pyramid, you could say. And the earth is thought of as this denser material region. So it's this, and the idea is that the soul naturally finds its happiness by ascending and finding its true nature, which is its God nature that exists up at the top of the spectrum. So you're trying to bring heaven and earth together. You're trying to marry what's below with what's above. So that's the kind of sacred hierarchy of ancient astrology. Well, we don't, that's tough for us today. So then we think, well, all the planets have to have an equal say. And in some ways they do, like they're all weighing in, but if a planet's really well dignified, if it was in an angular house, if it was in certain houses that were considered more beneficial or more, and potentially versus a planet that was in a house that was considered more challenging or afflicted, especially different aspects that were being made, and if planets were making appearances as morning stars or evening stars, that those things designated a planet as having more power to speak about the life than other planets. This is actually a relief, because what it turns out oftentimes that people really flip out about their charts when they start learning ancient astrology, because they're like, oh my gosh, like I heard, this house is kind of difficult and I've got a planet in this house and it's my son, or, and then people just kind of like, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm doomed or something like that? But no, most of the time there's going to be something in the chart that's speaking, just as loudly, if not more loudly, than something that's difficult, but people don't know how to see it. They don't know, oh, I should look for a well-dignified planet appearing as an evening star or something like that. Anyway, all of this is to say that there's different planets will speak with different levels of potency or strength or importance in a birth chart and in the sky at any given time when we're tracking transits and planets. It's always important to figure out, who's speaking when. All right, so you all survived my stupid analogy. Okay, now let's put this back up, and I'm going to go through the houses now one at a time, starting with Aries. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to eliminate everything except for Mercury. And you're going to look for this the last week of August and first week of September. Think of it as a process, not a linear date. Whenever people are like, well, at what time does Mercury come? Like, can I set my clock and go outside and be like, hey, Mercury, okay, you're here, you're going to speak. What are you going to say? But obviously the planets don't speak like that. The planets are going to speak generally through information that presents itself to you in the environment. If you have a meditative practice, it's the best because oftentimes the planets will speak more directly through some kind of meditative or mindfulness practice where you're clearing yourself and you're opening your hands to receive insight. So that's the best way to hear the planets, in my opinion. But they'll speak, they'll speak in your life and make things clear if you're paying attention and tracking the planets. All right, so we're going to take them through the 12 houses and give you a sense of what to look for based on your rising sign. So if you are an Aries rising, Mercury is going to make its appearance in your 6th whole sign house. Now, that was traditionally the joy of Mars in the house of misfortune. Typically, this is the house that has a lot to do with hard work, self-sacrifice, a certain degree of, servitude or sort of slaving away at something. And so the thing that's nice about this is results for hard work, or good news in the midst of a period of time that has been filled with a lot of labor. For example, if you've been sick or, dealing with some kind of health affliction, this is the time where you start to feel like you're recovering, or you start to get some good news about your health. If you are someone who has been working really hard, slaving away on a project, or really pouring yourself into something with some degree of self-sacrifice, greater or lesser, depending on your situation, but there's been an element of self-sacrifice, then you may notice that you're starting to get some good news or some return for that hard work. And you may also get just generally good information. Sometimes there's going to be job opportunities that come through as well. And the job may not be easy, but it could be a very beneficial job or connection. There could be also some need to speak or vocalize something that's difficult, and you're finding the strength or courage to say it or do it, because this house is also called the joy of Mars, and Mercury in this house will sometimes speak to, empowered speech, thinking, writing, communication. So you could watch for strong-mindedness to come in and be beneficial. All right, so those are just a few ideas if you are an Aries rising. Let's go forward to Taurus rising. Now, if you're a Taurus rising, we're bringing Mercury and it's making its appearance in your 5th house. So that house is called the house of good fortune, and generally is about things that happen that are pleasing or pleasant or enjoyable or sensual. It was called the joy of Venus as well. So we think of Mercury appearing in this house as like, a windfall, or, a return on an investment, or like one of my teachers once described this as this house as like you go to the grocery store and someone that you randomly meet at the grocery store, a friend, happens to be there that owes you some money, and they're like, oh, hey, yeah, I owe you that money. Here it is. Like, it's that kind of, that random, like for my girls, we were walking in the park, and it's like, oh, they found a shiny rock, and it's like this really unique, shiny, special rock. And that like completely makes suddenly the nice walk in the park becomes this, it becomes the celebration of wonder and magic because something kind of random and good happened. That's the 5th house. So if you're Taurus rising, it's a great time for there to be good news. Anything like, for example, we're selling our house right now. Mercury back in Maryland, Mercury appearing in this position, also the benefits, money benefits or profits from property or land could be a part of the equation, because this is the 2nd house from the 4th. So anything financial or monetary related to home, family, parents, land, property could be beneficial, as can the joy or benefits connected to children or pregnancy, romance, things like that. So Mercury's going to say something there, could be clarifying something there that's been in process for a little while. So I'm excited for that one. For me personally, as a Taurus rising, I'm like, oh, maybe our house will sell. All right. So if you're a Gemini rising, we're bringing it into the 4th house, where something that has been in process around the topic of home, family, parents, land, ancestry, ancestral karma will probably something that's been in process could clarify itself. There could be some kind of breakthrough that happens, but you're looking for also a moment of greater power and strength and auspiciousness, generally speaking, because of how well dignified Mercury is around the topic of home and family. You do have to be careful again with all of this. The little opposition from Neptune still lingering around. You want to be careful that you're being discriminating and being discerning with what's coming forth. But generally speaking, my outlook on this one is that good things should be presenting themselves. If you're a Gemini rising, that'll be in the area of home and family, property, land, things like that. Now, if you're a Cancer rising, this is happening in your third house. Now, first of all, the third house is like one of the more tricky houses to describe because it has this sort of vast meaning. Is everything connected to what is local or common, or everything that sort of surrounds or orbits your roots? For example, siblings, neighbors, neighborhood, things like that. But it also has connection to things like the mind and learning and speech and communication, and sort of can present itself as something involving the media or technology, or even some new idea or new way of thinking about something, or some new, for example, so many times people will get new cars or new computers or something like that when there's a powerful appearance or powerful transit in the third house. But if you're a Cancer rising, you're talking about anything, if you're involved in any kind of media, technology, learning, writing, communicating project, look for things to be more powerful and more auspicious. Also, if you've been looking for mental clarity, then it should appear. If you've been trying to get to know something, or getting to know something new relative to a new environment. For example, again, I'll just use examples that are close to me right now since we just moved. My wife is a Cancer rising, and she's getting to know the neighborhood right now and sort of slowly starting to gain a sense of like where everything is, very much like Mercury appearing. And that feeling of starting to feel like you know where you are, and you're gaining some deeper sense of familiarity and comfort with a new environment, that would be very much in line with Mercury's appearance in the third house right now. But it could also be that you're learning something new or getting used to some kind of new subject that you're learning. Like I'm in a class and I'm starting to get a little bit of a grasp on a new topic I'm learning. Or if you were in a Spanish class or something like that, you're starting to be able to speak a little bit of Spanish. So auspicious for learning and developing and gaining greater understanding of something. So those are some significations of Mercury's appearance if you are a Cancer rising. All right, let's move it forward to Leo. This is going to be in your second house. So Mercury's appearance here is really auspicious for the topic of money, resources, your time, energy, and things like investments. Now, Mercury appearing here can mean that there's also buying and selling of things, just in general, that's somehow pronounced. So there's a big purchase or a big sale or some kind of new agreement around the topic of your, like your salary structure or something like that. But really auspicious with the topic of money and resources. All right, so that's Leo. Now, if you are a Virgo rising, this is a moment of greater personal clarity. It's one of those moments where you feel like you're coming back to yourself, or you're coming back to your center. If you're Virgo rising, this is your ruling planet anyway, right? So it's that feeling of like coming back to myself, coming back to my center. With coming out of the opposition from Neptune in the 7th, wouldn't be surprising if you're starting to come back to greater awareness of your own needs and your own identity after a period of maybe deeper entanglement with someone or something else. Neptune in the 7th representing that someone or something else. It can also mean that there's a moment of breakthrough with regard to personal health or diet or physical appearance. Sometimes people will have like wardrobe changes, or they'll have a new health regimen or something like that. But also just deeper existential development. It's a time of personal illumination, you could say. So watch for that if you're Virgo rising. All right, if you're a Libra rising, we're moving Mercury into the 12th house. Now, this probably more than any other placement could mean that something that has been hidden to you, or something that you've been hiding, or something that has been happening under the scenes that maybe hasn't been entirely healthy even, is going to make itself known, or is going to start appearing. For example, this is where some form of gossip could become, some form of gossip that has been toxic could reveal itself, and you're starting to, unfortunately, reap the results of like gossip in the workplace. So this is one of those moments where you're going to be made aware of something that you haven't seen or that's been invisible to you. That would be one of my top kind of educated guesses about this transit if you're a Libra rising. On the other hand, this can also be about understanding things internally that have been hidden from you, understanding something of the unconscious showing itself to you. And that can be, there can be a lot of clarity and a sense of breakthrough that comes from that. There's also something about, trying to do something or get away with something out of fear or out of worry. So you want to be careful of that, because the 12th house Mercury can be sort of sneaky and deceptive. And even though it's really strong right now and sort of bright, the idea of trying to do something, for example, lots of times when people are worried about something, they'll have a way of trying to they can become extra controlling of all the details of the situation. And they'll find ways of sort of covertly trying to control and micromanage and everything, because there's this underlying anxiety. And that kind of like, let me just control everything. And you've probably done it before. I don't know. Like, I know that when, we're going to go out for the day, or we're going to do something, and I'm kind of worried because I got to get back and work at some point, I'll like overextend myself and try to control everything. And, it's like the kids everyone can feel it. It's like, you're anxious. You're just trying to make sure we get home on time. You're not enjoying it. Be careful of that attempt to manipulate or control everything based on, some kind of underlying fear. It's better right now to get down to the root of what isn't right, or what's bothering you, or what you're afraid of, and to just meet it and deal with it, than it is to come up with some brilliant but potentially really destructive coping mechanism. All right, let's move forward now to Scorpio. So if you're a Scorpio rising, we're putting Mercury's appearance into the 11th house. Now, the 11th house is the house of friends and groups. You could say to a larger extent community and allies, benefactors. So its appearance here is really nice in terms of like finding or meeting or connecting with new allies, new important groups of people or organizations, or important changes or announcements made within groups or organizations that probably are going to be beneficial, generally speaking. It can also mean that there is just some general sense of recovering from a period of chaos or difficulty or ambiguity or chaos within groups or social networks and organizations and things like that. But generally speaking here, Mercury should be bringing something that is beneficial. The 11th house was called the joy of Jupiter and was connected to this idea of benefactors, or people who are here to help in some way in our lives, especially with regard to our ambitions in the world. All right, that's if you're a Scorpio rising. If you're a Sagittarius rising, the appearance is happening in your 10th house, which is connected to your work and to your career. So you're going to watch for some kind of very powerful development or revelation in your career in the next couple of weeks. And that revelation could very well, again, point to something that's been in process, something you've been trying to decide or get clarity about. And suddenly, there's the clarity. It's bright. It appears, you know what you want, you know where you're going. The period of obfuscation or confusion is over. That would be the most likely, I think. It can also mean that there's some kind of important announcement that you're making, or some kind of important announcement that really is impacting your life. Mercury in this place tends to be the messenger more than other places. Whenever it's angular, it tends to be like that. So if you're a Sagittarius rising, look for career to be a focus. If you're Capricorn rising, then we're putting Mercury into the 9th house, which is the place of higher education, the higher mind, religion, mysticism, spirituality, divination, also foreign countries or places. So watch for these topics to become really important. Mercury in this house often points to some kind of intellectual process that you're undergoing, and this is truly like kind of, I feel like this is, for Mercury appearing in this position remember the sun has the trine to Uranus from Virgo to Taurus as well. I feel like this is a moment of mental, intellectual, or spiritual breakthrough, the real aha moment, the epiphany or the illumination from within. This is also, if you've been in doubt about something, your faith is restored. If you've been confused about something, understanding arrives, and probably in ways that, things that are bigger, that have to do with your sense of what's true, what's real, what's going on in my life, what's my life direction or purpose, kind of higher minded stuff. All right, so that's Capricorn rising. Now, Aquarius rising, we're going to put Mercury into the 8th house. Making its appearance in the 8th house, this is one of the placements that could be a little bit more difficult. The 8th house will often speak to debts or obligations that we owe to other people or that other people owe to us. The best circumstance for this might be that, you know, someone suddenly, something that has been owed to you is paid back or is given back, or you clear a debt of some kind, and the feeling of freedom and liberation from some kind of debt is, you know, really relieving. It can also mean that there is some positive movement or development that allows you to feel, you know, stronger or more free, but it involves collaboration with somebody else, where the resources that you have and the resources that someone else have are somehow joining together in order to accomplish something. It could sometimes be, this is difficult, but it could be also that, you know, you get that letter in the mail that you owe the IRS, or you get that letter in the mail that, you know, there's a bill and it's just a lot higher than you were thinking it was going to be. So Mercury, although very potent in this house, can also be the announcement of a potent debt that's owed, or like a penalty or a fee or something like that, unfortunately. But remember, there are positive, some positive significations here that are possible as well. So, all right. So if you are a Pisces rising, last but not least, Mercury makes its appearance in your 7th house of relationships. So in this case, you know, something, an important announcement, an important turning point, an important moment of greater clarity within a relationship, within a business partnership. Sometimes you meet someone, sometimes someone that you've been interested in announces their feelings to you, or makes them clear to you. This can also be a moment where something happens for a partner or to a partner that is generally auspicious. They get a job, they hear back from an interview, they get into school, you know, whatever the case might be. Mercury should be announcing something positive that either happens to a partner, comes from a partner, or is somehow related to an important relationship that you have, or something like that. Okay, so that takes us through all 12 signs. Now, obviously, I'm just doing quick hits here, you know, just trying to go through them really quickly. But I hope that this has been meaningful for you, gives you something to think about. I know people are going to ask again, when is this happening? It's a process. It doesn't happen in one particular moment. You could, for some people, it may happen, you know, in the next week. For other people, maybe the first week of September. Over the next 2 weeks, Mercury is making its appearance, and in that initial phase of appearing as the evening star will speak. So watch for it. And I'd love to hear from you and hear how Mercury speaks to you, or how these, you know, brief house designations aligned with your natal chart fit. Or maybe something else that happens that you could fill us in on. So in the meantime, I am now starting to plug my upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. This begins with on Saturdays, starting on November 14th, 30 classes on the year. They're all recorded, so you can participate anywhere in the world if you can't make it live. We have 30 classes, plus we have breakout sessions now that we've added to, so that in between sections of classes, my personal assistant Delia leads breakout sessions to help people integrate what they've learned. We have 12 guest speakers that come in outside of the 30 classes. The last third of the class, we're breaking down charts with live clients. It's a great way to learn how to read charts, and it's a great way to learn Hellenistic astrology, which will give you a foundation for learning any other type of astrology, because it is the oldest form of astrology, horoscopic astrology on the planet. So all that being said, you can check it out on my website, nightlightastrology.com. We have need-based tuition always available for people. If you are being affected because of COVID, please feel free to use it. In the meantime, the early bird rate is also in effect now, so you can take advantage of that if you want to save as well. So I hope to see some of you there. And in the meantime, please leave your thoughts and comments for me on Mercury's appearance in your chart. I'd love to hear from you guys, and I hope you have a great day. Take it easy. Bye.